And thanks for joining the webinar. In my last webinar, I purposely misquoted Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address by saying the business must conduct independent and objective testing of the business, by the business, and for the business. I also suggested that the governance and management of and testing were key elements in ensuring the success of business change and business transformation projects, especially when elements of those projects and programs, such as the supporting IT, are being delivered by third parties in an outsourced model. So, in this webinar, what I want to do is explore in more detail, in more depth, what governance, management and testing are, and how to build it into your contracts with your outsourced providers. So as we've said, my name is Ian Lonsborough. I'm a principal consultant with AppLabs, and I have experience both as a client and as a consultant of outsourcing and quality governance, management and testing. So what are we going to look at today? Well, in the next 20 minutes or so, I want to cover a little bit about the context of outsourcing, but as Stephen said, this isn't a seminar just about outsourcing. It's going to focus in on the quality and how to build quality into the contract. We'll also talk about how to implement the test approach within that contract and within an outsourcing model, and specifically the roles and responsibilities, who tests, who accepts, and the measurements and metrics and governance that are required. And then I'll bring that to a conclusion towards the end of the webinar. So, I just want to look at some of the outsourcing challenges. The challenges we face in a globalized and ever-changing world are themselves the drivers behind outsourcing. Outsourcing started in probably its first incarnation, in iteration 1, as a cost-based decision. It's now increasingly about delivering constant change, reinventing your business, and delivering high-quality change and transformation projects to optimize operating models. And in doing so, it's also necessary to streamline business processes and improve the IT systems that support them. So I just want to look at a path for outsourcing. This looks at 5 phases which we've discussed with the National Outsource Association as the path to outsourcing. And in this webinar I particularly want to emphasize the first 3 and look at how to build quality governance and testing into the contract and how to measure what you get back against these contractual obligations. So where I'd like to carry on now is as an organization decides on outsourcing, it needs to clarify its reasons for outsourcing. So if it's about reducing cost, by how much do you want to reduce cost? If it's about having a more flexible resource model, what are the minimum and maximum resource requirements? If it's about delivering products, services and systems to customers more quickly, what's the pipeline of requirements and when do you need them to be delivered? And if it's about enabling faster business growth, then that's likely to be about bringing innovative products and services to market and constantly reinventing yourself to stay ahead of the competition. So many different drivers and reasons for outsourcing. What outsourcing allows organizations to do is concentrate on their core business and play to their core competencies and key strengths. But when giving non-core business activities to an outsourced partner, the organization needs to clearly define what the scope of the outsourcing proposition is and who will manage that relationship. Considering those questions not only gives a sound basis for selection of an outsourced provider, but it lays the groundwork for the contract and the subsequent governance. If the deal is going to be of high value, you might want to consider using some of those sourcing professionals that Stephen alluded to in his introduction. An organisation also needs to consider whether its processes are strong enough to support an outsourcing deal. Are business requirements that you produce routinely clear, unambiguous, assumption-free, complete and version-controlled? And when you go into change control, are changes formally impact assessed before acceptance? So this is the very first stage of governance. A robust review of the reasons for outsourcing will either confirm that it's the right way forward, or it will highlight the flaws in the argument. So it may show that outsourcing is a rational decision and the right way to go, but it may also show that more groundwork needs to be done before a supplier is selected and the relationship's entered into. At this stage, at stage 1 of the decision to outsource, an appropriate governance team needs to be appointed to own the outsourcing and be responsible for overall governance of the outsource relationship. And that team needs to be drawn from the business and IT, because outsourcing isn't just an IT decision, it's going to impact on the whole business. We've mentioned a couple of times that you need to contract for quality, you need to build these things into the contract. An interesting quote from Paul Roehrig of Forrester in August 2008. Paul stated that no firms involved in outsourcing have managed to hammer together a deal that completely avoids all problems and issues. I think that's really interesting. What he's saying is we still haven't, as Stephen alluded to, learned all the lessons of outsourcing. For me, establishing an open and honest relationship with a supplier enables commitments, penalties, and topics such as intellectual property rights to be negotiated and agreed before there's any likelihood of dispute. We want this to be a win-win. These aspects of the contract are comparable, if you like, to a prenuptial agreement. Everybody hopes they won't be needed. Whatever the contract, the customer cannot outsource the risks to their own organisation. So, although you are going into an outsourced relationship, your outsourced supplier will not take on your risk. So you need to ensure that the supplier is contracted to support you, the client, the customer, during acceptance, implementation and warranty, to help you and support you to mitigate those risks which you own. The contract needs to be developed by the governance team that we previously appointed in the last slide, and take responsibility for outsourcing. They need to be assisted by senior managers who put the RFP together. In other words, it's the most critical task in the outsourcing path,